Ladies and gents, this is the moment you've waited for.
This is the greatest show!
And now, here's your host, Clint Arthur.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the greatest show of all time right here on 77 WABC Radio in New York City. And if you are an author, speaker, coach, consultant, expert of any kind, anybody who gives advice or renders services, and you want to be seen, be heard, and be wanted, this is your home on the radio and on the internet. Subscribe and like us on iTunes or wherever you found us. Really would appreciate it. I'm excited today because I have a very serious person. He's so serious he could be hardly contained on the planet Earth. He's a television personality. You've probably seen him on The Big Bang Theory, or recently he was on the Today Show just last week, as a matter of fact. He is none other than NASA astronaut, Columbia professor, New York Times bestselling author, Mike Massimino. Mike, thanks so much for joining me on the greatest show of all time.
Clint, thanks very much. This is one of the few times in my life I've been described as a serious person. I don't know. You don't
think you're a serious person?
I am, maybe in some ways, but usually I don't know if I've ever really been described that way. I mean, maybe I do a serious job, but I think try to keep it light.
You have achieved a lot of stuff that a lot of my people would like to achieve. For example, being a best-selling author. That's a huge ambition of a lot of my people. Could you talk about that and how that came about and what that has meant for you?
As an astronaut, I found pretty early on that I was more inclined to share the stories and do publicity events, public relations events. I kind of enjoyed them. I enjoyed telling them about what we were doing and telling stories. And more than most astronauts, as I said, I was more inclined to do that and enjoyed it. I got the sense more than a lot of my friends. And so I did different talks as an astronaut. I did TV appearances. And I always had the desire to try to write some of this down and write a book as a platform to get more of the messages out there so people could see it. And so the opportunity, once I left, it's hard to do those types of things when you're an astronaut. But once I left the government, it opened up those possibilities and got together with an agent who connected me with a co-writer to help me out. This is my first book. So that's how we put the book together. And then as far as becoming a New York Times bestseller, I think a lot of it has to do with the publicity around the book. Crown Publishing was the imprint, and Penguin Random House. And they put a lot of effort into promoting the book. You see it as I walk through the airports, and I did as much publicity as I could for it. I called in a lot of favors is what I did, Clint. I asked people to, let them know about it, and they would try to get the word out through social media. So I kind of put a full court press on there so that when the book came out, and apparently it worked. I thought it was going to be a funny book. You introduced me as a serious guy, and I thought there was going to be all funny stories. And then I think there's going to be another book coming up. We're trying to put a proposal together for that. I like speaking and telling the stories, but now I'm getting to the point where I also I feel like I'm getting better at being able to write them down and express them through, because it's two different things.
You say you like speaking. Do you consider yourself a speaker who writes, or what are you? See, I'm a writer who speaks.
I like to convey information by saying it, and I usually take more in by hearing than I do. Yeah, so to learn, I need to read as well. But no, I think of myself more as a storyteller, verbally, speaking, than I am with the written.
Do you do coaching and consulting, and how is that supported by your work as a writer and a speaker?
A lot of my speaking is keynotes to try to inspire people and share some of the stories and lessons that I learned as an astronaut. I try to, each time I speak, I try to make it so that the message is right on and relatable particularly to that audience for what they're looking for that day. As far as coaching goes, I'm also a professor at Columbia. That's kind of like my real job, sort of. And through that, I have a lot of students that I try to help whenever I can. I'm an advisor for our space club called the Columbia Space Initiative, the faculty advisor for that club. And I teach my classes, and so I try to, I guess my mentoring coaching side of it comes out as being a professor. And I think even my class that I teach is more like a coaching class than it is it's an elective about space flight. It's called Introduction to Human Spaceflight. And I try to share a lot of the lessons that I learned as an astronaut with the students. So
you got a lot of credibility, but even still, usually the media doesn't come banging down your door. That's my experience. How do you get gigantic media hits like being on the Today Show last week?
what I found, Clint, is that when you're given an opportunity, you make the most of it, and it will lead to others. And the Today Show, I think the first time they had me on might have been, I was hosting a show for the Science Channel when we had the eclipse. The Great American Eclipse was the name of the show when we had the American eclipse back in August of 2017. I had built a relationship with the different networks, the Science Channel, Discovery, National Geographic, and PBS, and would do news whenever I had the opportunity to do that. But like for Today's Show that you mentioned in particular, because I was doing that show with the Science Channel, the Discovery Network has really good public relations, media relations, and to promote the show and to promote the eclipse, I was offered up to the different outlets and news programs. The Today Show had me on. We did a very nice segment there, and I made friends with the producer and with the whole. I had met one of the hosts, Al Roker. I'd met him years ago, and so we remembered each other. But I think when you're given an opportunity like that, that's when opportunity is knocking. And if you try to do the best job you can and be your best self and do a good job and do all the things you can do, then I think they get comfortable with you, and then they'll ask you to come back, which is what's happened. So I think sometimes you can try to find these things, try to hunt out opportunities, and I've had mixed success with that. But what I found is that usually it's what is a somewhat better way to go if it happens is when you get that opportunity. You get that chance, you say yes. So sometimes it's just a matter of saying yes when something happens, and one thing can lead to, most of the time it doesn't, but every once in a while, one opportunity can lead to many more.
I just want to be clear.
Yeah.
I did not tell him to say that. I had nothing to do with him saying, just say yes. That's one of my mottos.
Oh, is that
just
right?
Say yes. I teach all my students. I say, just say yes. Because I've had people say no to opportunities, and it blows my mind because they don't come back, especially when you say no. You gotta just say yes. So thank you so much for that. What about other celebrities? Do you pursue photo opportunities with major celebrities? Do you talk about majors? I mean, you just mentioned Al Roker, for example.
Yeah.
Right?
Is
that a strategy that you ever think about at all?
No, I should. I mean, Al Roker was on the news. He interviewed me at the tree lighting. They did a tree lighting from the space station back in 2002 in December. And what was interesting thing now that I'm thinking about it, when I met him for the first time, I was with another astronaut named Pam Melroy, and I had never met Al Roker, but I knew who he was. I grew up in New York. And he was the weatherman here in the New York area, so I knew all about him. But he came up to me, and he knew who I was. He read my background, and he knew who Pam was as well. And I think what's cool about that is that what I find is that in some ways, sometimes the more well-known the person is, the more they'll know about you, because that's how they got to be good at what they do. Sometimes in an interview, I'll get an interview with somebody, and the guy doesn't even know who I am. Not that they should. But if you schedule me to come on, to do an interview, you would expect, and I find that Charlie Gibson, who did the ABC News, and Brian Williams, and some of the other people I've been interviewed, like David Letterman, that I've been interviewed by, they really were prepared. Even though I was, I'm not a household name like Tom Hanks, they knew I was. U2, the band, big fan of U2. They came to the Johnson Space Center for a tour. They were in town for a concert. Me and another guy, my friend Shane Kimbrough, were big fans, and I think NASA knew about that, and so they asked, hey, can you show these guys around? I'm like, of course, And what I realized is a lot of times when someone's a celebrity of that stature, they get hounded a lot by people. There's very few times where people can do something for them. They're used to doing things for other people. And I kind of got the sense that, we're not going to ask these guys for a lot of photos. We're going to make this about them, and they were there with their families, and we're going to give them. And we became friendly, and I offered, they were living in New York at the time, a couple of band members. I went and spoke at their kids' schools when I was in New York. It was something that I could do for them. So I think a lot of times, celebrities, the ones I've met, have always been so generous with their time. They do a lot of things for people. And so I think if I get a chance to meet them, maybe there's something I can do for them, whether it's something for one of their kids or a space story or something. So I try to not go overboard when I meet them. But
you've been really successful getting on TV, and a lot of my people are very interested in doing well on TV. What's the number one piece of advice you have for regular people to get people to think you did a good job? What's the most important thing a TV guest needs to do to be successful and get invited back?
I was friends with Neil deGrasse Tyson, is another name I'm throwing out there, but he was, he's a big NASA fan. I met him in between my flights. He was down in Houston getting an award, and one of my crewmates, John Grunsfeld, was an astronomer and knew Neil more from the professional astronomy stuff than any TV stuff. And Neil, I think he might have been hosting a show on PBS, but he's gotten much more known. When I was coming to New York, I had lunch with him. This is when I first arrived in New York about 7 years ago or 8 years ago. And I told him I was going to do an interview with ABC. But it's just a local little online thing. And he goes, well, you know what you do? You make sure you treat the interview that you do as if you're speaking on Good Morning America or something like that. Don't say, well, it's a small audience, or it's just an online outlet or whatever it is. He goes, you go in there and you do the best job you can and prepare and be on time and don't make demands. Then there's a chance that might lead to more. I find it's hard for me to promote myself, but through the different things I work with, whether it's at the Intrepid Museum or doing these TV shows with Discovery Channel or whatever it might be, that helps. That they have that machinery to get you possibilities to be on some of the news shows. I mean, I think it's really just, maybe just starting small wherever you can, wherever it might be, a small podcast or something. And then you have that kind of in your portfolio, and people will hear you and they'll see things. And the more you do, the more you're going to get to do.
These are some scary times. And I know you've done some stuff that people might be scared. Strapping yourself into a rocket and blasting off into space might have been scary for you. If you could talk about whether that was or not, and any advice you have for people right now on how to deal with fear.
There are some scary things we did as astronauts. So one thing that I've found is that thinking about things is usually a lot worse than actually doing them. The thought of launching into space, it kind of sounds really cool, but when you're thinking to yourself, I'm actually going to get inside of that thing, that is really scary to think about it. But once you get inside of there, it's not that bad. I used to get nervous about my dive checkout every year. We had to do this checkout in order to keep scuba diving to do our training. And it was, after a while I got used to it. But at first, like, oh man. But when you're actually doing it, I was like, this is not a problem. Why am I always so worried about this? So I think we can psych ourselves out to think that things are scarier than they really are. And it is very few things that I've encountered that are scarier to do than to think about. Usually they're a lot scarier to think. Once you're doing it, it's really not that bad. So keep that in mind. Things are generally not as bad as you think they are. I think that being nervous is okay, because I think nervous just shows that something is meaningful to you. If you're nervous about whatever it is you're about to do, to me, that's like, okay, I'm a little nervous, but that's because this is important to me. If I didn't care, I wouldn't be nervous. But there's a point where being scared is not going to help. And when you're at that point, you've got to shut it down, because if it's going to influence the outcome in a potentially negative way, you don't want that. And I think it's okay to be concerned. You're worried, worried about this and that. I'm going to take precautions. I'm going to be really careful. That's okay. But particularly when you're in the act of doing whatever it is you're doing, if you're playing a game or you're doing a performance or whatever it is, when you're actually giving the pitch, when you're actually doing that, being scared is not going to help, and you have to kind of push aside.
Does NASA teach you how to deal with fear in any way? Do they give you any tools or tricks?
I think they just expose us to these things. As a new astronaut, one of the things I got to do was flying a high-performance jet aircraft to get qualified, not to be the pilot in command, but to be the co-pilot. I was a private pilot, but I never was a high-performance jet pilot like my colleagues were. So one of the things they did with all of us is they got us trained up inside of high-performance jet aircraft. To do that, we had to go through water survival training and land survival training, and you start doing these things. And when I noticed, particularly with, let's say, for example, the water survival training, I wasn't very fond of the water. I never really learned to swim very well, and I had to I had to learn how to swim as an adult in order to get ready for my job at NASA. When I went down to Pensacola Naval Air Station down there for this training, I was a little worried about it, especially as one of the first things we were doing as astronauts. I go, this is not the best thing for me to be starting my evaluation period with. The Navy takes it a step at a time. You don't jump out of a helicopter or something, right away. What you do is you start, you're on the edge of the pool and you jump in the water, and then you go up on a higher platform and then you jump in the water. And you kind of get used to it little by little, and you learn how to do these things that they're teaching, and they kind of build up your confidence so that by the end of the week and a half or 2 weeks, however that class was, you're doing things at the beginning you never thought in a million years you could do it. And I think NASA has learned from that type of training where they'll start you off slow. They build your confidence. You're not going to get thrown into a spaceship on day one. You're going to get put into a classroom first, and you're going to learn about it. And then you go into a little simulator with just one instructor, and then you go into a bigger simulator, and then you don't go for the big experience right away. You build up to it.
This is my question that I ask every serious guy that I meet. What is the most important thing you ever learned, Mike Massimino?
If you look over my shoulder here, that man on the moon painted, this is just a lithograph, but Alan was a very interesting guy. He was a pilot, test pilot, became an astronaut, walked on the moon. He was one of the 12 men that walked on the moon. And then he became a commercial artist. And unfortunately, I got to know him very well, and got to speak at his memorial, and was a pallbearer for him when he died at Arlington Cemetery. And it was, I'm still in touch with his wife, but really just a great mentor. And I remember what he told when I first met him. He was speaking to my astronaut class, and he gave me this piece of advice that I put out on social media today, just coincidentally. So that's the piece you're going to get today, was that the key to leadership and teamwork is to find a way to care for and admire everyone on your team. You can't be a good team, you can't be a good leader if you don't care about the people that you're working with. And you have to, and if to go a little further, this wasn't in the social media thing, but if you can't find something in someone, I just don't like this person. What he said is, don't look at it as if you don't like them. Look at it as if you don't know them well enough, and try to get to know them. There's going to be something about, particularly at an organization like NASA, that you're going to be able to find something that you care for and admire about every person. And that piece of advice, I think, has served me very well, because sometimes you meet someone and you're like, I don't know about this person, but no, let me stick with it here, and then you find out that, wow, this is really a person I admire. And you have to care about the people you work with. And I think when I look at it, if you've ever had a leader that doesn't seem to care about their people, that is a toxic situation and will usually end up badly. But if you feel like your leader and your team has you and you're going to support each other, that is the way we should go through life. So that's my piece of advice.
Beautiful, beautiful. My guest today has been NASA astronaut, Columbia professor, New York Times bestselling author, Mike Massimino. If you've enjoyed this interview, you can see Mike and Dr. Oz and Dr. Drew and Surgeon General Jocelyn Elders and the real Patch Adams and celebrity chef Paula Dean and me and more at my conference happening in Atlanta, August 7, 8, and 9. It is for experts and entrepreneurs who want to have more impact, influence, and income. Go to IMM20.com. That's instantmarketingmiracle20.com. And you can find out about tickets that will get you up close and personal with Mike Massimino and everybody I just talked to. Thanks so much, Mike, for being with me today on 77 WABC Radio.
Thanks for having me, Clint. I really appreciate it.
All right, it's my favorite time of the greatest show of all time, the home repair section of the show, with none other than the CEO of homerepair.com, Mr. Tony Silva. What's on tap for the people of New York City this week, Tony?
This week, Clint, I thought it'd be a great idea to share some ideas of where you could find work. You know, a lot of people they're out of work right now, and the interesting thing about this, going to a lot of these happy hour Zoom meetings and these mastermind groups and talking to different people and CEOs of different industries is it seems like some industries are booming. They're, with this COVID thing, they're just out of control busy. And other industries are they're smashed. I mean, they're not doing well. So, I thought, just from my own perspective in my own business, I could share a tip with the audience. Hey, if you're looking for work, what would be a good type of business that you might be able to go work for and replace an income, maybe start a new career?
Yeah, the essential industries are where it's at. And I know that home repair is an essential industry in almost every state.
It is. I think it is now for sure. I know that there were some states we had a little bit of challenges with that had to be an emergency. But even with that, that's one of the keys there. Residential construction. A lot of times people think, oh, I've never built anything in my life. I don't know how to use a hammer. Construction's for my buddy Ralph. Who knows what the deal is, but construction is a different animal these days. You don't even have to know how to build anything to get involved with a good career in the construction industry, because with technology, there's accountants that are needed and marketing people that are needed, especially with like social media and content. And it's an industry that is exploding because we're always looking for great people. Plus, a new niche that's come up is the whole disinfecting type of restoration company. So we've always done restoration work. A storm comes, by the way, Mother Nature doesn't care about COVID. She just comes through and kicks the door down. And so storms happen. And those are essential services, essential companies to work for, or to have do work. And now there's this new type of business that's kind of emerging out of the restoration industry, which is the disinfecting. Because we're already equipped with all the chemicals and the supplies and the ultraviolet lights and everything. So the industry really is equipped to handle this type of a pandemic. And it's very busy right now. And it's a great, if you get with the right company, it really is a great career. It really is.
Amen. So what type of, do you need experience to get into this thing, or what's the best way for somebody to go about getting into a new job in the construction and home repair and associated allied industries?
The real key really is finding the right company. A good company that is well-rounded and has a lot of support, they're going to be able to take on people from, all walks of life. If you have good customer service and you care about what you're doing, you're a good worker, right? You're a good hard worker. It's not going to be that hard. The challenge is going to be finding the right company to work with. And so I have some key kind of indicators that these companies ask about these things. And if you kind of hit these 5 deals, you're probably going to be applying for a good company.
Okay, the first thing to look for as an applicant is?
First thing is I would ask if they drug and background check their employees, right? And that sounds like an odd one. Like, why would an employee ask that? But look, that's a key indication that company, they want to stay around a long time, right? They don't want to take any chances with someone getting hurt and being out of business. And if that's important to them, that should be important to you. So do they drug and background check?
Fantastic. Number 2?
The next one is do they advertise for 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week emergency services? That's a good indication that it's a restoration company, a company that is ready to receive calls for catastrophes. That's job security.
Fantastic. Number 3.
Third is, do they have an abundance of online positive reviews, right? It's not that difficult to get 2 or 3 good reviews on Google, but are there an abundance? Are there 100? And what are the customers saying? Again, it's longevity. What does this company actually provide as a service to the community?
Fantastic. Number 4.
This is kind of an odd one, but find out who the owner is and do some creeping, right? Social media is out there. Who do you work for? What is the integrity of the ownership of the company? What are their, moral and ethical values? Again, like what somebody puts on out in the, in their advertising, does it match their kind of personal life? And that, some people might disagree with that, but they really need to line up. So for me, I think find out who the ownership is and who they really are.
Yeah, you would do it if you were going on a date with a person, you'd Google them. Why wouldn't you Google the owner of the company? And the fifth
one is, do they have multiple locations, right? Have they already figured out how to scale? Do they know how to go from their neighborhood to the next town? Again, that creates some job security. You might have to travel from time to time, but hey, would you rather travel and keep making a paycheck if things slow down somewhere, or would you rather not? So, a company that's well-rounded and has multiple locations, in my opinion, is a great indication of a good, stable company.
and one that's growing. And you want to be with a company that's growing because you're either growing or you're dying. That's really what it means. And I'm not talking about growing around the waist because you're eating 5 meals a day. I'm talking about growing economically successfully. Hey, these were all great ideas. If anybody is interested, I know Tony's always looking for good people. Go to homerepair.com, or you can call, what's the number, Tony?
877-RED-HOUSE.
All right, more great stuff next week with Tony Silva on The Greatest Show of All Time. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap it up for this week. If you are interested in celebrity entrepreneurship, check out my book, Celebrity Entrepreneurship, on Amazon.com. You can find out all about it. And if you are interested in my event coming up August 7, 8, and 9, and you can join me and Dr. Oz and Dr. Drew and the real Patch Adams and Surgeon General Jocelyn Elders, celebrity dentist Catrice Austin, Janae Noonan, and the one and only celebrity chef Paula Dean at the Instant Marketing Miracle in Atlanta, August 7, 8, 9. We'll be back next week at 9:30 p.m. right here on Sunday nights with the greatest show of all time.
Greatest show of all time.